Good afternoon, morning, whatever it is. SOAP 3 Community Services, last video, I believe, for the year to get us through the stuff that I've been teaching. So we're in the middle of the homelessness unit, and this is the last video, I think. Last video I'll have to make to get through the knowledge questions. So we're up to part 7. Diversity, gender and cultural considerations, and I'm hoping to get through part 8 as well. But question 1 in part 7, why is it important to consider cultural diversity when designing programs to work with people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness? Choose 2 responses that indicate your knowledge. So why is it important to consider cultural diversity? So I guess do a little crash revision, if you like, on that idea of diversity. So think about our diversity unit that we did just before the homelessness one, and the idea that I guess the people that we work with in terms of community services are diverse people, and I guess broadly speaking they could be considered at-risk groups. So just on this slide here we've got, for example, women and children escaping domestic violence, people with a disability, people with mental health issues, AOD, gambling or other addictions, perhaps young people or youth, rural communities, people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, elderly, non-English speaking background there. And I guess what might bind a lot of these groups together is some sort of trauma. So again, we've just got that final point there, people perhaps leaving jail or an institution, or young people leaving care and protection of the state or alternate accommodation, so being in the care of people other than family members because of some, I guess, trauma perhaps, but again that word trauma linking a lot of these groups together. So we need to consider all these diverse backgrounds, experiences. And so, having the ability, those good communication skills, those engagement skills, those active listening skills as the core starting point, or perhaps that's accessing alternative support if there's a communication barrier of some sort. But being aware of what all these differences are and what they mean is important. And I guess just briefly, that idea of cultural safety is going to be captured in the preferred answers as well. So cultural safety defined as the recognition, protection and continued advancement of the inherent rights, cultures and traditions of a particular culture. So I guess, in simple terms for me, cultural safety, if you turn up somewhere to workplaces or wherever and you don't feel that you're going to be excluded, ridiculed, put down or at disadvantage because of your cultural identity. And again, just broadly speaking, cultural identity can be all of those things that we just mentioned in terms of those diverse backgrounds. And I guess, as I said, linking a lot of those groups together is perhaps trauma. And trauma is, in terms of impacting on people, can be an unwillingness perhaps to engage or communicate, being that heightened sense of arousal, distrust. And so again, that's really important to be informed of trauma and how that impacts on people. So if we look at question 1, so why is it important to consider that diversity when we're working at people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness? So I guess I've alluded to making sure that the program or approach is culturally safe, and I guess doing that by your people-centred approach, strength-based. Perhaps you're working from a lived experience as well, but trauma-informed definitely. There's nothing wrong with B in a sense to include all perspectives in program co-design. Bit of a mouthful, but the one that we're also after is to prevent further trauma to a person seeking help from a service system that can be complex and difficult to navigate. So we don't want further trauma. So when we're engaging or people engaging, it's not about meeting funding, that last one. So it's A and C there for 1. So number 2, a gender lens means examine an issue from the perspective of a particular gender. Why is this important when considering the structure of lived experience of the homelessness service system, and what reasons may there be for this approach? And you've got to go true or false. So I guess that first part of the question was that gender lens, and I guess that's important to have that understanding of what the experiences might be different from the different genders. So trying, I guess, empathy and putting yourself in someone's shoes, and it's not about one gender being better or winning at the expense of another gender, but understanding that sometimes there are inherent issues and disadvantages people may experiences based on their gender identity. And part of that first one there, so economic inequalities between different genders is a minor contributor to homelessness. So I guess that word minor is the thing that stands out. So economic inequality between different genders is a minor contributor to homelessness. In fact, we could argue that it's a major contributor. So things like access to power and resources may be more beneficial to men in a sense, and wielding also physical and psychological power perhaps over women. And I guess the rate, and I guess what the telling factor is the rate of women escaping domestic violence, the rate that women are hurt or even killed per week in this country. There's obviously an inequality between genders in this space around homelessness, and so economic inequality is actually a major contributor. So the answer is false. So B, to look for patterns of increasing homelessness over time. For example, older single women or LGBTQ youth. So we're looking for patterns around homelessness. And I guess there is a pattern. So older women are finding, older women are entering that homelessness space, perhaps getting out of relationships, perhaps abusive relationships, but finding that they don't have resources, access to money, and they're quite vulnerable, getting a bit older. And that's something that the patterns, the stats would show and indicate, and that is true. And the other one there that they've identified, that should be LGBTQIA plus youth. So young people, there are patterns that identifying in the LGBTQIA group are dealing with some significant challenges, perhaps with acceptance at home, perhaps with mental health concerns and challenges. And so certainly the patterns show that there is a link between some of those encounters of, acceptance, broadly speaking, and challenges, that is a bit of a pathway to homelessness. So the answer to that one is true. C, equality requires responding to all homeless persons in the same way, regardless of gender. That's false. So we do have different services, that specialise in working with men, working with young people, working with women and dependent children. There are different approaches. So the answer there is false. D, to identify patterns of increased risk, for example, for experiences of robbery or violence in young homeless men. And again, looking at the stats or the stories or the experiences that people tell us, and I guess inherently living on the street is dangerous and violent of young homeless men. And the answer to that one is true. That is a reality. You might listen to the lyrics of this song from a few years ago that actually comes from the experience of young homeless people. Just have a quick listen to this.
Basically, 6 months ago were excellent. Everyone was looking after each other. Like, you had the squats, main squats were the Empire, the JR, Jolly Roger and the old Palais. All of us were looking after each other, but then the coppers started to come in, bust us, started to arrest us on sight.
As I lay on the hard cold road in my tether clothes, bones ache in the draft and my stomach hurts. No one notices my fragile frame, that's withering away in this wind and rain. Looking for food in bins of all places, don't find much, but what I find seems tasteless. Sometimes I don't eat for days on end. I even get so hungry I just start to pretend that I'm eating some nice roast dinner, where I'd end up snuggled in the blanket during winter, to where I'd wake in the morning fresh invigoration. Who am I kidding? This is just imagination. Back to reality, slashed in the gutter. Family don't recognise me, just a change from my brother and my own mother. Whispered, look at that man, as she kept on walking with those warm gloves on her hands.
There's nothing much we can do. There's a housing shortage. because there's not enough funding. There's just not enough support for operation to support the homeless. It's just going to get worse.
How could it come to this, living on the streets, homeless with no place to go, no place to sleep? No mansion on a hill with a maid, no 9-to-5 job, flashing bills cause I'm paid. I close my eyes, dreaming of the better times. Should've seen the warning signs, getting more involved in crime. Straight up trying to survive, trying to keep myself alive. Such a situation sure to damage my pride. I spend a cold winter's night just trying to keep myself warm, trying to weather the storm. Who would've thought when I was born life would turn out like this? No home in which I live, no comfort of a kiss, no chance of feeling bliss, only sadness and despair. Whoever said that life was fair, there's nothing that prepares someone for the struggles I've seen. I'm trying to keep clean, trying to keep myself sane, trying to find other ways than drugs to numb the pain.
A home is basically just, as long as it's got a roof, 4 walls, that's a home.
Whoa, now hold up, I need to steal food. I'm really sorry, I'm not being rude. I haven't eaten in weeks, I'm losing kilos so quick. My clothes don't fit, and where I laid my head last night now stands a pile of rubbles and bricks. And eating out of bins is no good, it's making me sick. So please sir, can you spare some change and put this weary soul on his way, which would be a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak day. Why don't you get a job, you slob, living off of the streets? I've seen you type before, I bet my spare change is used to feed the addiction of drugs and drinks, and have a wash and brush some clothes you stink. But sir, if I could I would, I'm looking for a hand up, not a handout. A roof over my head and I make some fair ground. But until such time you'll be cold, harsh and heartless while I live inside this darkness.
You're finding that it's not as safe as it was before?
No, like now Friday and Saturday nights, if we're in the squats, we've got to worry about people just coming off the street and flogging to us while we're asleep. It's pretty much what they do, they just come in with bricks, iron bars, just belt us while we're asleep.
3. When delivering homelessness services, how should organisations ensure their service is culturally safe? For example, for newly arrived refugees and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Choose true or false for each statement that demonstrates this concept in practice. So just briefly, so it is about quality of service provision, so being professional, timely with your responses, being ethical and fair, having the client participate, respectful regardless of age, gender, or that diversity, being suitably qualified, working together and collaboratively with the people that are seeking services, and good systems in place. So that's just a recap. So let's have a look. A, prioritising choice for engagement with a community worker of the client's own background. So enable it to be culturally inclusive or appropriate. The answer to that one's true. Recognise and respect lived experience and create programs that use a trauma-informed approach. So again, it's that working with people's background and strengths, enabling the client to participate, and that will be best done in a collaborative approach, and respect lived experience and trauma-informed approach. So true. Provide info on available services when entering the service. And I guess there's a little trick in this question. When we're saying entering the service, you will actually be providing all the info prior to entering, so people can make an informed decision. So that one's false. Recognise and respect cultural safety is determined by the community and co-create safe services led by the community. So in short, that one's true. So it is about getting information from the community, and I guess the First Nations community would be a great example of that one, where they're leading the way and informing services and saying this is what's required of your service to be culturally safe, culturally inclusive and culturally appropriate. Okay, so up to part 8, services, supports and your role. So number 1, how would you describe the core role of a housing worker in a public or community housing organisation? So you've got to go for 2 answers. So that client-centred practice, being respectful and engaging, acknowledging that there might be particular power imbalances suffered by many people who are homeless. So that's stuff like abuse or being victims of crime, etc. It's about what the client needs, wants, whether it's client-centred. People get a choice though. We're working in partnership and it's holistic. We're working in all areas of someone's life, considering all those sort of interrelating parts of a person's life to make the whole. So let's have a look. So what your role would be if you're working in that homelessness sector. So we're needing 2 answers. So A, saying referral to specialist support service to help maintain tenancies, for example, mental health, or maintaining support services, for example, street to home. So in a sense, we're saying linking to the most appropriate services. And I guess that's that idea of working in partnership within networks. So that one's A is an answer. And then the other one that is provided is D, accessing eligibility for housing, managed tenancy and or property maintenance throughout the tenancy. So that may be the role. So assessing where someone's at in terms of their eligibility and helping maintain the tenancy. The next one is also, I guess, worded similar but different to that first one. It's saying, number 2 is saying, how would you describe the core role of a homeless or housing support worker in their first role in the sector? So they're sort of saying, if you're a new worker, what would you be doing? Let's just say maybe, from want of a better word, inexperienced worker. So are you going to be doing clinical case management as a new or inexperienced worker? Probably not. So that was not A. D was manage the technical aspects of a medium or long-term tenancy, technical stuff, probably not D. So B, provide a range of support depending on the service type, for example, street outreach, crisis support in emergency shelters. So that one, yeah, new worker might be doing that sort of stuff. And C, assess the needs of a person during an intake or tele-interview, such as public housing, temporary accommodation services. So it's working out if someone's eligible, say, to crisis accommodation might be something that you do there. 3, how can case management framework assist in supporting people to develop stable housing outcomes when in crisis, supported or social housing? Choose the answer that best describes the process. So just briefly around case management. Case management is about looking at ways to overcome barriers and to keep your accommodation going. It could be working with family and friends and looking to ways to support people through those networks that they may have. Is it about relocating people into some other supported housing or other housing option? Is there ways of increasing income? Is it employment or training? Is it referrals, other services, rehab, etc.? And linking in with other services that may be appropriate and helpful, and that could be using referrals. So that's the sort of stuff a case management approach might do. So A, through providing a structured approach to holistic client needs, including homelessness. So again, it's that looking at the whole person, all different aspects of their lives, and trying to get some structure in the approach and coordinated approach so that it all makes sense and it's not just higgledy-piggledy, but it's sort of coordinated and makes sense. And that is the answer. So only need the 1A. 4, how does the involvement of peer workers with lived experience support housing outcomes for people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness? Choose 2 answers. So I guess, what are the benefits of having workers in the homelessness sector that have their own lived experience? So often called peer workers, and they're saying A, they can advocate for change in services to better meet the client needs based on their experiences. So A is one of the answers, and they're saying, having that insight and that knowledge, what to advocate for. Got good understanding, good empathy, good knowledge, know what's needed. B, peer workers can share from lived experience, which builds rapport with clients going through the same issue. So it's about connections and building rapport, and the answer to that one is that was B, is the other provided answer. So let's have a look at the last one, question 5. It's saying young people exiting out of home care, I'm going to put the word care in there, young people exiting out of home care face a known heightened risk of homelessness. Well, that's true. The stats say that if young people are leaving some sort of supported accommodation because they're in some sort of alternate care, not care of the family, they're at risk of homelessness upon leaving. Often that's when they get to a certain age and they become too old for a service, perhaps too old to be cared for by the state, and it's like moving on. So there is a heightened risk there of becoming homeless. So which ways demonstrate options for preventing homelessness in younger people when transitioning from care to independence? Choose 2 responses that best describe these options. So what works best? for young people moving from care to, I guess, independence. An empowering approach supporting choices and options in sustaining tenancy with step up and step down support. That's a bit of a mouthful, but it is a supplied answer. So empowerment, I guess that's about choices working together, and the step up and step down is sort of that stuff that I think has been given other terminology in this assessment previously, things that, like the FOIA approach, so having some sort of wraparound services, extra support and subsidised rent, but also perhaps engaging in a commitment to do some extra training if need be. That's all part of that step up, step down support is my interpretation, and I'll just go straight to the other. Preferred answer is D, access to affordable social housing through subsidised private rental or social housing. And that's come up previously about if there is some sort of rental relief or subsidy that takes the pressure off people, so they're not paying, exorbitant percentage of their income, whatever their income is, that does take the pressure off, and people are much more able to maintain their tenancy. So yeah, if it's affordable, whatever it is, social housing or subsidised private rental, whatever the option is, but if the key word there is affordable, that's useful and helpful and helps people succeed and get through. So that's your other one, D. That takes us to the end of this final chapter of this assessment. So thanks for paying attention and doing it this way with our online learning, and doing these videos to help us get through the amount of work that we have to do has been one approach that I've put in place. And I know you've had other commitments today, being the second last week of class, doing first day, but I'll be back in class next week and we'll see if we can mop up any loose ends as we need. So I'll say thanks once again and toodle pips.